Today, as you will know from when you signed up, we are talking all about SEO reporting. We're talking about the SEO reporting problem, and specifically how to create reports that stakeholders actually read. So I have the pleasure of your company for the next kind of hour or so. Gonna talk at you for the next kind of 45 minutes, and then there is some time for questions at the end. So pop things in the chat or using the Q&A function, and then I will be able to get to them at the end as well. Wonderful. We've got a good amount of people, so I will get cracking. We have a lot to cover. But yes, we are talking today about the SEO reporting problem. So how to create reports that stakeholders actually read. But first off, a quick introduction. Hi, I am Liv. I'm Digital Loft's SEO Lead. I have been for the last 3 years or so. And then on top of that, I have been in the SEO industry for a few more years. And I have the absolute pleasure of leading on organic strategies across a really diverse range of clients. At Digital Loft, we get the fun of working with businesses of all shapes and sizes. We don't have a particular specialism other than working with really growth-hungry specialist brands. So we will work with e-commerce brands, B2B businesses, all the way from household names down to tiny startups and everything in between, which gives us a lot of insight into how brands like to report and what really matters to businesses. And since I get the pleasure of your company for the next kind of hour or so, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about me. Some of my hobbies include gigs. I went to about 30 different live music events and festivals last year. I play a lot of netball. If there's any Americans here, it's like basketball, but better. And obviously one of my big hobbies is getting frustrated with Looker Studio. And in no particular order. I'm not forgetting my most important hobby. I am really, really fun, I promise. SEO reporting. And how do I know that it's a hobby? How do I know that I love SEO reporting so much? I estimate that I have written over 500 SEO reports in my time. Done a little bit of the maths on the sideline. So I'm thinking if I've written over 500 of them, must be a hobby by now. And I actually think the bulk of the SEO reports that I've written in my career have never been read. And I appreciate that that is a very bold statement from someone who is going to be speaking to you for the next 45 minutes or so about SEO reporting. Very bold statement to make, but I also think I've worked out why. So if you stick with me for the next 45 minutes or so, I will tell you exactly what is going on with SEO reporting and why it's perhaps going wrong. So in the next hour or so, I'm going to talk you through where most SEO reports typically fail. I'm going to talk to you about what senior stakeholders actually think of SEO reports. I've been doing a bit of digging on LinkedIn. I've sent a survey around. If any of you are connected with me on LinkedIn, you will have had me pestering you or pestering your LinkedIn feed with wanting insights for this survey that I'm running. So I'll be sharing some of the insights there. I'll be talking about the metrics you need and also perhaps the metrics you don't need in your SEO reports. I'll talk about what makes a standout SEO report. And I'll finally finish with a framework that's going to help you build really impactful SEO reporting. And so I mentioned the survey that I've been running, and we've got some really great insights. I've been speaking to a lot of business leaders, whether that is CEOs and founders, whether that's in-house SEOs, marketing directors, heads of marketing, anyone who may have eyes over an SEO report. And when asked how helpful they found their current SEO reporting, on a scale of 1 to 10, so 1 being not helpful at all, 10 being the most helpful in the world, 40% of people responded with a 5 or lower. So it's really quite clear that SEO reporting is failing in some way. And SEO reports generally fail for a handful of reasons. And I'm going to, over the next couple of slides, over the next sort of 20 minutes or so, talk to you about what those reasons are. And the first one, which I think came up in the conversation with most people I spoke to, most of my answers, is definitely the biggest reason, and that is a lack of alignment to business goals. And so throughout this presentation, I'm going to include a couple of quotes and things from the conversations I've had with people, from the LinkedIn messages and comments that I've received, and also responses to this survey. And the first of those quotes is from someone who I know is a marketing manager, who says, "I've seen multiple SEO reports that haven't mentioned leads or revenue once." Which is a bit of an eye-opening one when SEO is a marketing channel that should be having a return on investment and should be delivering revenue at the end of the day. And that's really exemplifying what we're saying about that lack of alignment with commercial goals. And I think the main thing that we want to bear in mind is that SEO metrics are not generally business metrics. Too often we see SEO reports that are written by SEOs for SEOs. And then they're read by CMOs or chief marketing officers who really only have one metric in mind: revenue. And if you're paying for an SEO agency, am I getting the return on investment that I'm paying for this agency? And for multiple people, the most important metric, as reported by this survey for SEO, is a performance versus a target or a forecast. And I say that specifically against a target or forecast, and we're usually talking sort of a revenue or lead gen target here, is that all too often SEOs don't have these kind of targets. They don't have these kind of forecasts. I've often worked in agency environments where the goals feel a little bit vague or a bit wishy-washy, and they don't have the real kind of tangible link to a business's commercial goals. So that would be my first piece of advice to you if you're working in perhaps an SEO agency or you're just working part of a larger organization. Make sure you know what the business's overarching goals are and understand how SEO is going to play a part in getting there. So quite often from an SEO perspective, we might say something like, "This keyword has increased to position 1. From an SEO perspective, an amazing win. We love a position 1 ranking, perhaps might not be as valuable today in our AI world as it was a few years ago, but still a great win to have." And then what we get in return is we get a CEO or someone higher up going, "Okay, but what impact is that having on my revenue?" We can rank for all of the position 1 keywords in the world, but if it's not having an impact on revenue, if they're not the right keywords, then it's not going to have an impact on revenue. It's not going to deliver that positive impact that we want. So what we could say instead is that this keyword has increased to position 1, and this was a really high priority commercial intent keyword related to one of our products. And as a result, that priority product page has seen an X% increase in traffic, and we're beginning to see, as a result, organic revenue from that product increase, which is one of our highest priority targets this year. So what we're seeing there is that SEO metric, still really valuable to report on that keyword ranking movement, but then we're seeing it tie into the impact that it's having, particularly against those commercial goals. And every SEO metric that you report on should ladder up into a commercial impact in some way. And that's quite a nice litmus test of sorts to be able to say, why am I reporting on this? Is this going to have, in some way, sometimes it's more tangible than others, but is this going to have an impact on the business's bottom line? And if it's not, it's a good opportunity to ask yourself why you're reporting on it in the first place. And that reporting should really mirror the business strategy. So if you've got specific goals that you're working towards, your reporting should mirror those goals. And one of the other quotes that I received in response to the survey was a lot of people saying, "I often find the challenge isn't a lack of data, but focusing on what genuinely matters to the wider business." And leading on from that, the second kind of pitfall that we're seeing with SEO reporting is that there's too much data and not enough insight. And I got this quite a fairly blunt response from one of my survey respondents, but always appreciate it anyway. And I think this is in response to SEO agencies going, "Do not waste clients' time with reports that just regenerate Google Analytics and Google Search Console." Very to the point, but I 100% agree with the sentiment. SEOs love a tool. A little bit too much, in my opinion. I think there's definitely a tendency in the industry to have an over-reliance on SEO tools. We love SEMrush, we love Ahrefs. But the real value from an SEO, whether it's an in-house SEO or an agency, comes in that analysis and understanding. Because anyone can go into GA4 themselves and look at a traffic graph. However great that traffic graph might seem, this is not an SEO report. And another one of the respondents said, giving the context and explanation to the numbers, I believe, is what differentiates good from bad reporting. So we could see this wonderful, wonderful graph and say, we've seen traffic up perhaps 100%. It's good results, but it's still not a great SEO report if you don't know what it is that's got you to that position. The insight is what makes or breaks the SEO report. And that means focusing on what metrics are up and why. If results are down, why? In SEO, we often see people hiding behind negative results or trying to make the best out of a bad situation. If results are down, they should be addressed in an SEO report, but can come with that analysis of why. Has there been anything else that might be impacting performance? Has there been a core update recently that might have been having an impact? How are competitors trending? If we're down a little bit, but competitors are actually down really significantly, that's a really helpful insight to have. Are there perhaps wider market conditions impacting performance? We've worked over time with a lot of businesses in really cyclical industries, things like housing or energy, things that go through peaks and troughs over the years as well. Perhaps there are wider market conditions impacting performance. Are click-through rates down noticeably in the last year? Could that be impacting traffic? For most businesses, click-through rates have decreased. I've seen click-through rates absolutely drop off a cliff in the last couple of years, thanks to AI overviews taking up more space on search results, thanks to organic shopping listings taking up more space on search results. So your traditional click-through rates are generally decreasing. A CEO might not have that level of insight and might look at a decrease in traffic and instantly think that it's the end of the world. Has demand changed? And is there anything else that could be impacting performance? I, for one, love trying to get any kind of extra non-SEO insight that I can. I have been known to look at traffic graphs in relation to the weather. At Digital Loft, we work with a lot of businesses who are very dependent on the weather conditions. We've worked with companies who make paving slabs, who make garden furniture, things like that. And I've been known to get Met Office reports from comparing 1 month year on year and going into my SEO reports and saying, this February, as we know, in the UK, there was 80% more rainfall than February last year. And as a result, that has impacted demand significantly. There's so many things going on around the world that are going to be impacting consumer demand and consumer behavior. So we need to make sure that we're not just operating in a silo and we're taking into account the context of the wider world that we find ourselves in. The third thing that got pointed out as a failing in SEO reports currently is that we often see little to no connection between the work done and the results that we're seeing. And one of the respondents to the survey said, I don't think many SEO reports cover the basics well enough. And by that, I mean, we did this and it resulted in X results. If you can tie work completed to outcomes, that goes a long way to solving that problem. And I would add to that and say, if you are working as an agency, that could be the difference between being retained by a client and not being retained by a client. If you can tangibly show that link between the work that you've done and the results that you're seeing. And if you're working in-house, that could be the difference in you getting a pay rise or that next promotion by being able to really clearly show there is impact of the work that you're having. I often think that SEOs are notoriously bad at making themselves look good. Quite often I see SEOs doing really amazing work and not shouting about it nearly enough. I think we're quite humble as an industry. And then with SEO reports, what we want to do is make it really, really clear the projects that we've done, the tactics that we've implemented, and exactly how they are translating into results. We often talk about outputs rather than outcomes, or we talk about the two very separately. We'll produce an SEO report that says, in this month, we produced this many pieces of blog content, we optimized these few pages, and we earned 50 pieces of coverage. And then the middle bit is missing, and then we talk about results. But what's missing is that middle part where we talk about, well, the pages that we've optimized have seen this specific increase, and we think it's for this reason, and this is what's translating into that revenue increase. And this ties on very well with point number 4, which is a lack of action and a lack of next steps. Again, this ties into that second point about not including the level of detail and analysis that stakeholders might want to see. And I often talk to my team about a framework called Impact, Insight, and Action, which really helps to showcase. It's very much one of those sort of 3-point strategies that you might have had if you're in England in like GCSE English, to make sure that you're really explaining the points that you're giving. So we can talk about an impact. So we can talk about what specific impact did a tactic that we took have on commercial goals this month. Then we can provide the insight. Why do we think this might happen? What specifically about our on-page optimization might have driven that change? And then the action. What will we do with this knowledge going forward? All too often, we might have some really great insights, but not work it into the wider picture, not use those as learnings for future months. And here's what this could look like in action. So we've got that impact section. So this month, we retemplated and updated copy on 5 priority landing pages as a test, for example. Looking at these specific pages, we've seen a 40% increase versus our control group in clicks. We can move into the insight. We said we think shortening this copy has improved pages' topical relevance for priority keywords, which Google is rewarding. And then we move into the action. As a result, we're going to roll this template out across our remaining landing pages. And just as another example, we can say for the impact section, this month, we saw a 30% drop in site-wide traffic versus this time last year. Moving into the insight, this appears to be specifically across blog traffic, where the increase in AI overviews is leading to a reduction in clicks. However, if we look specifically at our revenue-driving commercial pages, traffic is up by 15%. And then moving on to the action. In line with this, we're going to continue to prioritize our commercial intent pages in our SEO strategy and segment traffic into commercial and informational intents in future reporting. This is something that I love to do. I have spent a long time making Looker Studio dashboards for all of our clients at Digital Loft. They're all completely personalized for each client and their goals. But one thing that I have in all of them is a breakdown of, we have total organic traffic, we have organic traffic to specific priority pages, and then we also have that informational traffic. One thing that we've seen so much as an industry over the last couple of years is reductions in click-through rates, as we said, reductions particularly in clicks for informational traffic. But if we can break that down and say, well, inevitably clicks to informational content is down by about 20%, but the clicks to our core revenue driving pages are up by 10%, it paints a much better picture, and we're not selling ourselves short. And then the final main failing that we see with SEO reports is that they aren't tailored to the audience. Examples like this are all well and good if you're talking to a head of SEO. Perhaps if we have a few clients at Digital Loft where we are an SEO agency and we're reporting directly to a head of SEO or an SEO manager. They love this level of detail and insight. It really helps them. If we're reporting to a CEO, I would keep it a lot more top level. And that's where a lot of reports go wrong. They're not tailored to their audience. One person I spoke to on LinkedIn said, if you approach SEO reporting as a stakeholder alignment method, instead of a painful task that you have to go through every week or every month, that's when stakeholders get on board and realize the value of SEO. And I think we've all been guilty of this at some point in another, thinking that that monthly report or a quarterly report is just a tick box exercise. We get to the start of the month, we try and get the report out as quickly as possible, send it to the client within the first couple of days, without really taking the time to understand how important and how valuable it can be. One of the most interesting questions that we asked in the survey was, how well do your senior stakeholders, so people like your CEO, your CMO, any sort of real heads of department, how well do you think they understand SEO? Not one person answered higher than a 5 out of 10. So 0 was no understanding whatsoever, and 10 was a perfect understanding. And I will say there were quite a few zeros in the data as well. So what we're seeing is, I'm really sorry if there's any CEOs that are joining this call, but we're seeing a real lack of SEO understanding. And that really has to impact how we report to people, surely. And this highlights just how important that personalization is. A report to a CEO should look completely different to a report to an SEO manager. If you're reporting to a CEO or a founder about SEO results, as I often have done, you need to lead with a commercial focus. Don't particularly need to focus on smaller SEO metrics like rankings or impressions unless you're specifically asked to. And every single metric that you report on, even more so than usual, needs to be tied back to commercial goals. And we want to make sure that we're avoiding SEO jargon wherever possible. So I've plotted a couple of those key stakeholders on this graph. So on the x-axis, we see the level of detail that we want in a report, going from low detail to high detail. And then on the y-axis, we've got the strategic focus, whether we want that really kind of high level commercial focus or a bit of a more in-depth operational SEO focus. And in the top left, we've got your CEO, your founder, your MD. They most typically, not always, want that much lower level of detail. They want a report that they can skim within a couple of minutes and get the key information that they need. And that focus needs to be a much higher commercial level. If it's not directly speaking to them about how well their investment is performing, they probably don't want to know. And then on the other end of the scale, you have perhaps a head of SEO or an SEO manager. They're much more interested in a higher level of detail, and they still very much want that commercial focus, but are also interested in that level of operational detail as well. They want to know what have we done? What specific tactics have made an impact this month? And you can also think about SEO metrics a little bit like a pyramid. And I realized as I started putting this together just how many metrics there are that we can report on from an SEO perspective. Now, at the top of that pyramid, we've got return on investment, we've got leads, revenue, conversions, those really commercially focused metrics. And then all of the way at the bottom, we have some things that we'll still want to talk about as SEOs, the number of pages that are getting indexed, particularly if you're working on a specific project or a programmatic approach, for example, a core web vital score, if that's something that you're working on, the volume of links secured, the number of referring domains. And then we've got everything in between. A CEO is most likely going to care about those very top metrics only. They want the leads, the revenue, the conversions. And an SEO specialist is likely going to care about all of the metrics in the pyramid. They may care about some more than others. You're not going to be able to report on every single one in every single report, but they may be more interested in some of those less tangible things such as impressions or a core web vital score, because they know exactly how they will translate into revenue at the end. And then following a conversation that we had with a CEO of a company during a quarterly report yesterday, I've added in another slide. CEOs love AI visibility. It's something that I'm seeing plenty of from where we talk to CEOs, founders, managing directors at Digital Loft. I'm seeing a lot of founders getting really, really interested in AI visibility. And on one hand, it's a little bit of that shiny object syndrome. It's that new thing that people are really excited about. It's something new that we've never seen before, and we really want to be as visible as possible in ChatGPT and AI overviews. And there's an element of kind of stakeholder management needed here. We might not be the most visible overnight, and it also might not be, for their specific business, the most valuable thing. A lot of people are having a bit of a tendency to overinflate how much people are using LLMs or AI search for those real commercial intent decisions. Some people are, and in some industries, I know some kind of SaaS industries, we're seeing a lot. And then in some industries, we're seeing barely any customers shopping or making that purchase decision via AI platforms. So there's a bit of a balance to be had. But I also see a really nice flip side. I see, through talking about AI visibilities, potentially more engagement with certain CEOs and founders that we work with than we've ever had before. We're really lucky at Digital Loft to have clients that we have worked with for years and years and years. And they're very trusting, and they will kind of let us get on and do exactly what we want with their site, and they're really happy with that. And since we've been talking to them more and more about AI visibility, they're taking a much more involved approach in a really, really great way. They are more involved, they're more engaged, they're asking more questions, and it's leading to really, really insightful conversations as well. So there's a little bit of an extra. CEOs love AI visibility. Use it to your advantage, but just make sure that you're managing that expectations and still focusing on everything else from an SEO perspective too. But as we know, and I would not be able to make an SEO presentation without including this in, it depends. The answer to any SEO question ever is it depends. And that extends to your SEO reporting. There is no one size fits all. There may be a CEO out there who really, really cares about SEO metrics. I've seen it a few times before. I've seen CEOs who have a really strong marketing background who actually want to know the nitty gritty about what you've done. They just have that personal interest. So it's easiest to just ask questions like, what metrics are you personally KPI'd on? If you're working with a digital marketing manager, for example, I had a conversation with a client the other day who said they're recently now being KPI'd on a new metric. Could we see how we can particularly support that and how we can work it into our strategy and our reporting? What do your reports to your bosses focus on? I think we often forget, if we're reporting from an SEO perspective to someone, they will have reports of their own to produce. How can I make your job to report to, if you're a head of SEO, report to your digital marketing manager or your CMO? How can I make that job as easy as possible for you? Who else is going to read this report? One of the questions that I asked in the survey was, how often do SEO reports get read by non-SEO stakeholders, so people like a CEO or a founder? And I think that was exactly a 50-50 split. So it's really important to be aware of who else might be reading this report. I've seen it before where reports don't include that level of insight or data, and I'll speak to someone and they'll go, oh yeah, but our day-to-day contact knows that. The person that I work closely with knows the wider context. You don't know where that report might be getting forwarded to. So make sure that you have that level of detail that you need. We can also ask for feedback on previous reports. Sometimes it's difficult to get that feedback. I always try and get it get it on a call, or just really, really pester someone to make sure that they give that level of feedback about what did you find most helpful from previous reports. That could be previous reports that you've produced. If you're working in an SEO agency and you've got a new client, for example, what did you find most helpful about previous reports that another agency has done for you? Are there any tools that we use as an SEO agency, perhaps, that you don't have access to internally? I often think this is a bit of a understated superpower for an SEO agency. You often have access to all of the tools in the world within limits, but plenty more tools than perhaps an in-house SEO might do. They often will have their own Google Analytics, they'll have Search Console, they'll probably have a SEMrush or an Ahrefs. I often include links from or screenshots from Systrix in my tracking, and that's not something that every in-house SEO will have, and they really appreciate those other visibility metrics that they might not have access to on the day-to-day. And what metrics would you like to see in our reporting? Is your North Star metric going to be organic revenue, or is there something else? Is it a cost per acquisition? Is it a lead number? Is there something else that you are really, really focusing on? And how often would you like us to report to you? And in what format would you like to see that? We've had clients at Digital Loft. Our standard is a monthly report to all of our clients to go through these metrics. But we've actually had clients come to us and say, you know what, we trust you. We completely trust that you are on the right track and you know what you're doing. We'd prefer you to just report quarterly and instead spend that couple of hours that you would spend on a monthly report on just the action, on the doing, on generating us more results. So it's really important to just ask that question as well. And then we got a little bonus reason from the survey, which may get a couple of eye rolls. And that is that GA4, every SEO's best friend, isn't accurate. This came up more than I perhaps expected in the survey. We had one person directly just say SEO agencies are really poor at attribution. And then we've also had people mention that events are not set up correctly on the site, so reporting may not be accurate. Someone else said that there's a real difficulty in finding one source of truth that everybody trusts, that conveys all of the different elements that stakeholders really care about. I definitely know in my time that I've produced SEO reports and had someone go, oh, is that from GA4? That's not our most accurate. That's not our source of truth. We know that GA4 isn't set up accurately. It's a conversation we've been having a lot internally at Digital Loft about just how accurate some GA4 accounts might not be. And so the advice that I would take on this, aside from speaking to some sort of tried and tested SEO experts, is to start off by confirming one universal source of truth with everybody who does reporting for your company, whether that is internal or external. Will we be using GA4 as that source of truth? Do we have a CRM? Do we have a CMS that has data that we trust? Where are we treating as that one source of truth? Then make sure that you've got agreed upon conversion metrics for reporting. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a GA account and there are 20 different events that are all set up, something along the lines of purchase, lead generated, thank you 2, thank you 3. Make sure we know what conversion metrics we are reporting on. We want to make sure that we're treating GA4 as a directional, not an absolute figure. I think particularly with things like consent mode, we've slowly become aware of the fact that GA4 is not going to be 100% accurate. But as long as we've got consistency, we can treat it as a really clear directional indicator of success. Make sure you are regularly auditing GA4 for any tracking or attribution anomalies. We've seen it recently. A client launched a new website and they changed the way that their cookie pop-up appeared. And suddenly we've seen an extra 50,000 in revenue in 1 month appear as unassigned revenue, we've seen a massive drop off in organic traffic and a massive spike in direct. So make sure you're constantly spending that time in GA looking at any kind of abnormalities and flagging them. Do not ignore paid. I think one of the other pitfalls that we see with SEO in general is that we often treat it as a siloed channel. Making sure that you report on SEO in the context of other channels is really, really valuable, particularly if you're reporting to someone like a digital marketing manager who's going to have eyes on multiple channels. And then make sure you can also cross-reference GA4 data with other data sources. So we have clients using Shopify who know that their GA4 isn't the most accurate setup, who will ask us to use Shopify instead because that's a source of truth that they really, really trust. And we've talked a lot about metrics over kind of the last half an hour or so, but what metrics should we be reporting on in SEO reports? And as I've mentioned before, there are a lot of metrics that we could report on. And I've actually taken that pyramid that I showed earlier and expanded it even more with metrics. I think most of these metrics I have reported on in some shape or form at some point in my career, but never all at the same time. There is no way that we can include every single one of these metrics in an SEO report, nor would we want to. All of these metrics together would not make an effective SEO report. And at Digital Loft, what we choose to do is we often group metrics into traction metrics, which are really early success indicators. These then move into traffic metrics. So is this strategy working? And then once the traction metrics have rolled into traffic metrics, they will then turn into transactions. So that's really the indicator of, are we having an impact on the bottom line? So when we're talking about traction metrics, we often talk about things such as keyword rankings, impressions, brand searches, AI visibility. These on their own aren't going to lead to revenue, which is obviously going to be that bottom line, but can be a really nice indicator of early success, particularly if you're working on a new strategy or with a new client, or you've taken a bit of a different directional turn. It might take a little while to see the impact on the bottom line, but if you can see impressions start to increase, if you see rankings start to move, it's a good indicator that you're on the right track. Next up, we've got traffic metrics, which very much do what they say on the tin. You've got your organic traffic or clicks. I often like to divide these into brand and non-brand, depending on what the goals of the strategy are. You can also include within this share of voice metrics, share of search metrics, looking at the competition. And then also things like LLM referral traffic or organic shopping listing visibility and clicks. And then finally, these are going to translate into traction metrics. These are always going to be the most important ones. And it's usually, for most businesses, a form of revenue, leads, or conversions. And the other issue that I'm often seeing is that most SEO reports aren't set up to drive growth. Another stat that I really, really enjoyed from the survey was that 60% of people, if we asked, could improving SEO reports improve stakeholder buy-in or budget approval, 60% either said agree or strongly agree. So it's not just about making our numbers look better. It's not just about kind of proving our worth. Effective SEO reporting can significantly improve that stakeholder buy-in and that budget approval. And then the final stage of this is taking all of those insights and creating an SEO report that we know senior stakeholders will actually read. Now, I like to divide my SEO reports into 3-ish parts. And the first part of this is going to be some kind of an executive summary. The aim of that executive summary is to give a really quick snapshot of performance versus commercial goals. And this is going to be for your CEOs, your founders, your managing directors, who may just have 30 seconds to look at a report. We're going to put this section first. It's going to be the easiest to see, and it's going to take less than 30 seconds to glance at. So what we're going to see is a couple of quick scorecard metrics. I usually do my reports in Looker Studio, get them downloaded as a PDF. So get a couple of scorecards in there. And most effectively, it will be a performance versus a target. And failing that, some kind of year-on-year revenue increase. We're going to put those very top-line metrics there. And then a very brief bit of analysis of how has revenue, organic leads, organic conversions, whatever we're talking about, how is that performing and how is that trending over the last month? Is there anything specific that we need to stop, continue doing? Keep it brief and keep it readable. That second part expands on this a little bit more, and the second part of the report is for business impact. So the aim here is to give a bit of a closer look at transactional metrics with slightly more in-depth analysis of what is and isn't working and why. So this section of the report is really geared toward your heads of marketing, your digital marketing managers. They're going to have a bit more of an in-depth understanding of SEO metrics, but they still need a bit of a quicker top-line overview of how organic is performing so that they can then compare it perhaps to other channels. And within this business impact section, we're going to lead with a little bit more of a deeper analysis. So how are specific metrics trending? Why? Is there anything else that perhaps we need to bear in mind, such as we talked before about market conditions, if there's a core update that may be impacting performance? We can then also include a little bit more. You see there's a few more different priority metrics that we can include here. I would, again, report on revenue or leads and conversion here. Maybe some other things such as average order value or conversion rate or engagement rate that might be some of those sort of traction metrics that lead to that commercial success. And then I also at this section like to include a bit of a bigger picture look, some kind of visual performance trend, perhaps usually on revenue, that looks at this year or the last 12 months versus the previous year. So that if someone is a little bit more time poor 1 month and doesn't have the opportunity to read through all of the analysis, they can still really quickly see how we're trending. And then the final part, unfortunately, at the end, is the SEO impacts. And now the aim here is to showcase specific SEO wins that are going to really ladder up into business impact. So when we talked about the traction and traffic and transactional metrics, those are going to be the traction and the traffic ones. Here we're going to have a bit of an opportunity for even more in-depth analysis about what is and isn't working, what we might do more or less of going forward, and tying that to the specific tactics that we've done. This is going to be usually for a head of SEO or someone a little bit more SEO minded within an organization. Now this SEO impact section is a little bit longer. We're going to have the deepest level of analysis. We're going to look at the specific tactics that we've done that month, what's worked, what might not have worked, why we think that might be. I think that's even more valuable to say rather than just this had a good impact, this didn't. And what are we going to start, stop, or continue doing based on this next month? Again, we're going to have some of those core metrics, but they're going to be a little bit more SEO focused this time. So some of those organic traffic metrics, clicks specifically to commercial pages, AI referral traffic, things like that. It cannot be an SEO report, unfortunately, without a keyword ranking table. So we want to have a look at the ranking performance of some of those priority keywords. And again, any other visual representations, just so that someone can have that really quick glance if they need to and understand how we're performing. But as I do not need to remind you, I'm going to include this meme for the second time. It depends. And while I've shared that as a framework, it's very much the basis of what all of our SEO reports at Digital Loft look like. No two reports look the same. No two reports have the same amount of metrics, the same type of metrics, the same tables, the same graphs. They are all bespoke because every business is going to have different needs. Every stakeholder wants something different from a report. When one of the questions that we asked in the survey was, how long would you like an SEO report to be? About half of the people responded one page only. And then the other half responded 5+ pages, which was the maximum amount. So it really reinforces the need to ask someone exactly what they want from that report. What do they need to get from it? Let's have a quick recap. SEO reports fail for a handful of reasons. Generally, there's a lack of alignment to business goals. We see too much data and not enough insight. There's little connection between the work done and the results that we're seeing, the outputs and the outcomes. There's a lack of action and a lack of next steps. We see reports that aren't really tailored to the audience. We see someone sending the same kind of report to a head of SEO as they do to a CEO. And of course, this has all not helped with issues with inaccurate GA4 reporting. But you can definitely make your SEO reports more impactful. You can make SEO reports impactful by starting with business goals, prioritizing that over everything, focusing on insight over data. For every metric, there should somewhere in that report be an explanation of what's happening and why. Connecting that activity to outcomes, providing really clear next steps. So great, we've got all of this data, but how are we going to use it to make our strategy even better going forward? And tailoring reports to the reader. And then when that reporting improves, SEO becomes so much easier to defend and so much easier to build upon and invest more in as well. And then one of the main takeaways that I want to leave you with is that if you treat SEO reporting as a tick box exercise, no one is going to be getting any kind of value out of it. The main value from SEO reporting comes from the context, the insights, the analysis that really connects the dots between the outputs and the outcomes. And there we have it. I've seen a few questions popping through, so I will get to those now. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'll get through as many questions as I can. And then finally, I also wanted to remind everybody that Digital Loft are hosting the Digital PR Summit this year. It is back on the 22nd of April in the Royal Northern College of Music, which always feels like a little bit of a mouthful, on the 22nd of April. And there's a QR code for tickets if you have not already signed up. There is an amazing bunch of speakers across both digital PR and SEO. We've got a whole dedicated SEO panel and we launched the speakers for that yesterday. So check out our LinkedIn and all of our posts about it if you've not seen those yet. But wonderful. I will get to some of the questions. One person has asked, is it better to use multiple sources, so SEMrush, GA4, Google Search Console, or one single source of truth? I think this is an interesting question. I think making sure that you've got one source of truth that you do trust is really, really valuable, but I would then use multiple sources to back it up. I would always prioritize first-party data, so where we have clients, we would always use some form of Google Analytics or Google Search Console for particularly sort of traffic metrics rather than SEMrush. We know SEMrush is going to give us an estimation rather than that kind of first-party data. But it's always helpful to have those other tools that you can use as a bit of a cross-reference. It's really helpful. I often will cross-reference GA4 and Search Console if we see Search Console reporting 20,000 clicks, but we actually see Google Analytics reporting 10,000. that's usually a pretty good indicator. That's one of my kind of first signs that something might be off with GA4 tracking. So it might be worth investigating. Next up, I've had a question on, can you see how organic keywords perform in Google Analytics? Not directly. You are able to link Google Search Console with Google Analytics if you want to be able to see everything in one place, but that is just pulling information from Google Search Console into the Google Analytics interface. So I would always use Google Search Console as my source of truth for how keywords are performing in terms of the number of clicks we're seeing. Next question we have is, can you expand on how you would report on SEO in the context of other channels? I think that's a really interesting one. I think there's a couple of different ways that you can do it, perhaps depending as well on kind of brief that you're given as an SEO as well and how integrated you are with other channels. I would always advocate for SEO being really integrated as possible with the other channels that you have. One of my recommendations that I always have when onboarding a new client with Digital Loft is that we get to know every other person working on different channels, whether that is internal or other agencies. Absolutely love working with other agencies. I think some of the best meetings that I have are ones where we're talking to a client and their PPC agency comes along, their social agency comes along, and we're really sharing some great ideas all together and having a really positive impact. In terms of the reporting, I always want to make sure that I understand what proportion of overall traffic and revenue is being driven by organic. It's also quite a good sense check if GA4 is reporting accurately. If we're seeing it actually lower than we think it should be, or we're perhaps seeing direct taking up more, then that might be a source indication that something might be wrong. Having that awareness of what paid channels are up to, particularly that paid search channel, is really valuable from an SEO reporting perspective. I've had conversations with clients before where I'm really trying to troubleshoot a drop in traffic or perhaps a drop in branded traffic, and they can really quickly go, oh yeah, it's because we've completely switched up our page strategy. So that's going to be meaning that fewer people are clicking on that organic result, for example. I mentioned that the QR code for the Digital PR Summit is not working. I can send across the link, but also if you just type in Digital PR Summit into Google, we will be showing up first. And that is on good SEO. Another question on, do you advise rounding up monthly or quarterly work completed and write-ups into your SEO reports, or do you find sending it separately better? I like to include a brief overview of the work that we've done in an SEO report, because then I include sort of a little box that's just, here's a really top line overview of what we've completed, whether it's sort of the pieces of content that we've written or a specific technical project. It helps to give that little bit of extra context in the same kind of entity as the reporting. And then we can also bring in specific pieces in the analysis section. So if we want to talk about an increase in a particular keyword, and we can say that's specifically down to this optimization that we did that we mentioned at the very beginning. So I'd always include that really brief roundup of monthly or quarterly work, however often you're reporting, not in the most in-depth level. If a client or someone in your team particularly needs that, you can go into a lot more detail in perhaps another sort of format. Sometimes I just send a end of the month email that's just, here's exactly what I've done this month, here's what I'm planning to do next month. So maybe get that gauge on what the person you're reporting to would like to see there. Sometimes they don't need to see that at all. Sometimes they have that kind of complete trust. Plenty of questions coming in. Thank you, everybody. Got one that says, I was not given specific metrics to determine our success in terms of traffic sessions versus page views, which is better to report on? Why would page views be up and why would sessions be down? It's an interesting one. I can't think of specific reasons why page views would be up and sessions would be down. It could be kind of a cookie related thing. It could be a tracking related thing. I generally always stick with sessions for my reporting, just from the perspective of it's going to align kind of most closely with exactly what we're doing from an SEO perspective. It's going to align more closely with clicks. There's also clients where we specifically report on new users, that metric in Google Analytics as well. So again, if you can ask the person that you're reporting to what they report to their bosses on, what is most valuable to them. But as a default, if I've not been given that guidance, I would always choose sessions. And then how am I doing for time? I've got a couple more minutes, so we'll get a few final questions in. This one I find really interesting. In our channel, there's always so much going on, from technical optimizations to content optimizations, and then digital PR campaigns, social search. Do you have any recommendations on how we can improve results and outcomes when it's hard to isolate or attribute to a specific activity? I think that's such an interesting one, and I think it's quite a difficult one, and it's something that we've encountered as well, particularly where we work with some brands who are putting a lot of effort into branded activity. They're doing loads of influencer campaigns. We're all working towards the same goal at the end of the day, I think, is that's the most important thing to say. So any win is an overall win. But I also completely understand the desire and sometimes a need to attribute something to specific things that we've done. Technical optimizations, it is a struggle. You're not always going to be able to attribute a specific technical fix to outcomes. It's a lot less kind of tangible. But I think content optimizations, you should be able to attribute a little bit more closely. I've only recently started using SEO testing as a platform. It's not a necessary platform. You can also do annotations within Search Console, within Google Analytics. But what I really like is that it gives you a way to plot on it. We made optimizations to this piece of content on this day, and then track sort of the before and after as well. Of course, it's something that you can do manually as well, but getting really specific, going into kind of that page by page level, particularly with content optimizations, or if you're working on a specific keyword cluster, looking at performance of the keywords specifically in that cluster, looking at a particular group of pages, if you've got a particular kind of commercial subfolder or a page that you've optimized, looking at that traffic at a page by page level as well is a really handy way to attribute that and make sure that you're kind of advocating for yourself and showing the impact that you have had in amongst all of the amazing things that the social and the brand team are doing as well. And then I think I have time for one more, and that is very much an age-old question of how are you tracking AI visibility? It's a really difficult one. I think very much my stance on it is there is no platform, there is no tool that I think is really, really nailed AI visibility. I'm sure my LinkedIn DMs I'm going to regret saying that. There's going to be people in my LinkedIn DMs trying to sell me every tool under the sun. I have used plenty of them. I get the benefit of working with clients who have their own tools, having free trials to things, used tools all the way from kind of the most expensive ones, Profound, things like that. And I've also used some of the free tools, which I've found fairly beneficial as well. I like to track AI visibility using a combination of tools and manual testing as well. A lot of the issues that we see with the tools and things that we see at the moment is that they're using synthetic prompts. They're using prompts that no real people are actually typing into ChatGPT, for example. So what I like to do is that I then supplement that with going into an incognito mode and doing the real kind of prompt engineering myself and having a look at how my brand or my client's brand is being surfaced in LLMs as well, to get some of that kind of real first party data on how we're performing. But it's definitely an pretty new, an ongoing struggle within AI visibility. And I don't think anyone has got it quite nailed yet. So definitely open to hearing people's thoughts there. Wonderful. And that is time, I'm afraid. I know there was a couple more questions in the chat box, so I will, if anyone wants to speak to me again, you can speak to me on LinkedIn. I have my LinkedIn at the very beginning, but it's just my name, Liv Day, or you can email me at olivia.day@digitalloft.co.uk if you had any other questions that you wanted answering or fancied having a natter about SEO reporting, which we always love to do. But other than that, we'll let everybody enjoy the rest of their Thursday. But thank you very, very much for joining. I'll be sharing these slides across on LinkedIn as well if anybody wants a recap, and you'll be getting a follow-up email from the Digital Loft team as well. Thanks, everybody.